In the wake of the Karmelo Anthony case, there's been a lot of debate in terms of who represented him at trial and whether or not his representation is what resulted in the guilty verdict that has now sent him to prison for 35 years. I'm going to break this down and get you thinking about the differences in attorneys and hopefully dispel some myths. Hi, I'm Melba Pearson, also known as the Resident Legal Diva. Be sure to like, comment, and subscribe to my channel in order to get all the updates on things that are impacting your life from a criminal justice perspective. And also done with a little diva flair from a former homicide prosecutor. I've read, and a lot of my videos are often fueled by things that I see on social, comments that I see on socials. And I saw a lot of comments around, the Anthony family got a public defender or they got a free attorney, and so this is what they get, and they should have mortgaged their house to get a better attorney. And then on the flip side, they paid for an attorney, that was a waste, this and that. Why did they pick a white attorney? All of that. Lots of debate going on there. But let me just break down a few things from a basic perspective. First off, public defenders are damn good attorneys. A lot of folks be like, what are you talking about? Because it's free. Because in your mind, you're thinking if it's free, it can't be good. It's only good if I pay for it. That's not the case. As someone who is a former homicide prosecutor who tried cases for close to 20 years, I've been up against some public defenders that are gangster. And I see their name, I'm like, okay, get ready, y'all, because we gonna be fighting. Because these particular public defenders that I'm thinking of, they are passionate. They are true believers. They will stay up at night, do whatever they need to do to fight for their clients. And they all do this for a low salary, right? Because nobody gets rich being a public defender or a prosecutor. I trust and believe. There's no bonuses. If you win X amount of cases, you get, no. The budget is the budget. It's hellified. And that's why a lot of folks end up struggling and end up leaving, even though they love the job after 2, 3, 4 years, because they're like, the math ain't mathing. I cannot afford to live, right? I want to buy a house. I want to have a child. I want to go on vacation somewhere, right? Yes, they don't get paid well. But despite that, they are passionate about the cause, passionate about justice, and passionate about representing people. Now, the same also applies to some private attorneys I know. I see that name and I'm like, ooh, all right. Either A, this person got some money and they're willing to spend for their defense, or this person is just an amazing attorney, period, end of story. But I've also been up against private attorneys who are complete garbage. They suck. Absolute suck. And I'm sitting there like, man, that family being put together. Because the reality is they hired somebody because, again, they thought paid was better than free. And now they hired somebody who is not going to fight for them, is just stringing the case along to see if maybe they can get a plea. And then, oh crap, really? We're going to have to go to trial? Let me see if I can plead this out at the last minute or whatever. They're not really fighting for your rights, fighting for your liberty. I hate people thinking that just because you gotta pay, it's better. That's not necessarily the case. Now, some people don't have a choice because in order to be eligible for the public defender, you have to be indigent or basically be close to the poverty level, not making a lot of money, right? Unfortunately, there are people who are working class or middle class who hiring an attorney would be a financial strain, but you don't make so little money under the guidelines that you would get an attorney appointed for you. So remember your whole Miranda rights. You have the right to an attorney. One will be appointed for you if you can't afford one, that kind of situation. But there's literally forms you have to fill out. And if your salary is too high, you don't qualify. So now you're stuck. You have to hire an attorney. The question is who? So when you're going down that process, me personally, I strongly recommend if you are looking for counsel to represent you in a criminal matter, you hire someone who used to be a public defender or used to be a prosecutor. Why? Because prosecutors and public defenders go to trial like it's nobody's business. That is the training ground in terms of learning the rules of evidence, learning how to deal with different types of evidence, figuring out the holes in a case, in a story, figuring out how to fix said holes in a story, right? So all of these are skill sets that come from being a public defender or a prosecutor. So I would stake, if I was in a bad situation, heaven forbid. But if I was in a bad situation, I'm looking for somebody who has done a ton of trial work. Because again, they're comfortable, they're not afraid to go to trial, and usually they can stand on that. Because again, if the prosecutor knows you're a trial dodger, they're not going to stress, right? But if they know you're going to come with the fire, they're going to be looking at their case 2, 3, 4, 10, 20, 30 times to make sure the case is airtight. And if they're realizing there's holes in the story or holes in the case, they're talking to your counsel to figure out how can we resolve this case. And many times public defenders are able to carry that level of respect and fear in some ways. So these are things to consider. Look at the past and the history of that particular attorney. Have they tried a great deal of cases before? Have they tried cases like your situation, like the level of charge you're dealing with? Also think about what other types of cases have they handled, just from the perspective of, listen, if this is a murder case or an attempted murder case and they mostly handle DUIs, that's probably not the right attorney for you, right? And someone who specializes in homicide may not want to handle a DUI because, again, DUIs have some scientific components and all of that. There's folks who specialize in that area, so you may be better off just finding someone who has a specialty in the type of charge that you're dealing with. So this is just a brief overview of things to consider, but I want folks to remember, free does not mean bad. And in saying that, a family who may have qualified for the services of a public defender should mortgage their house, put themselves into debt, just for defense. Not saying don't do it, but think deep before you leap, right? Don't automatically do it as an assumption. If you do it, it's because you've already met with the public defender. You're not vibing. You don't feel that they really get it. Because again, not everybody's a good fit for everybody. And again, I want to be clear. I'm not saying that they're not crappy public defenders, but they're also amazing ones. And I have had the pleasure of knowing both categories. And the same comes for private attorneys. I know people in both categories, right? Maybe really nice, but maybe this wasn't your ministry. It is what it is. So I want folks to really be considering these things before you make judgments and assumptions based on they're an assistant public defender or they're with legal aid versus, oh, this person's paid. Because paid don't mean good. And again, this whole situation and the outcome is incredibly tragic. But at the end of the day, this is who they went with, and that's how the whole trajectory panned out. And to my understanding, he was a hired attorney. Whether he should have been the one or not, separate issue, because again, I don't know a ton about this particular attorney's background. Maybe he has handled homicide cases before. And the logic that I've seen floating around, which, listen, it was likely going to be an all-white or a rural Texas jury, so hire somebody who can speak their language. That's not a flawed concept, right? But also keep in mind, Ahmaud Arbery. Y'all remember the prosecution of the brothers who had murdered Ahmaud Arbery, chased him down, the whole thing? Well, the prosecutor that handled that case was a white woman. And when she spoke to the jury about the case, she didn't talk about race. It was a controversial decision at the time as people were waiting for the verdict because they're like, why didn't she say that this was racially motivated and this and that? She could have, but she also knew it was a rural Georgia jury. And so she made it basic. Listen, man running, men chased man running, men murdered the man running. He's guilty. They're guilty, right? She kept it, stripped it down and kept it as simple and basic as possible. And she got a conviction. So again, there's a variety of different mindsets and strategies that can come into play depending on who your jury is. Again, knowing your local context and all of that. These are all things that sometimes make the criminal justice system very frustrating, but this is also the reality that we're dealing with. So I hope I gave y'all some food for thought on that. Sound off in the comments with additional questions you have or other videos you want to see me do when it comes to talking about jury selection, talking about types of attorneys to hire, how to handle all that. Because that's my jam. Stay safe, stay informed, and keep demanding justice. Take care.